Have you ever felt that
Hmm.
that invisible nudge, maybe in a conversation, or you made a decision you later thought, why did I do that? You just couldn't quite figure it out.
Hmm. Or maybe a news story just leaves you feeling uneasy, but you're not sure why.
Exactly. Well, today, we're really pulling back the curtain on those kinds of hidden influences. Welcome to the deep dive. We've gathered a stack of sources, Daniel James Hollins' dark psychology secrets, academic stuff, our own notes, and we're distilling it for you.
Yeah, the goal today is to give you a solid handle on dark psychology. We're looking into persuasion, manipulation, deception, even mind control tactics.
It's all about understanding those subtle forces, the often unseen ones, playing out in daily life,
Right.
and ultimately helping you, defend your own mind.
It's really less about generating fear, I think, and much more about building critical awareness. It's not just how these things work,
Right.
but also recognizing, well, our own human nature and how we can be sharper consumers of information and interactions, not just passive bystanders.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. What is dark psychology? Our sources frame it as a field looking past, all the positive psychology hype
Yeah.
to explore, and this is a quote, the potential for evil within all human beings. And it gets into criminal sort of deviant behavior too. It's about the parts of us that might find gratification in, well, the dysfunctional side of things.
And a key concept here is something called the dark singularity. Now, most criminal or, let's say, deviant acts have a reason, right? Power, money, revenge, something goal-oriented.
Sure, makes sense.
But dark psychology suggests there's this unique space in the human psyche. It allows some people to commit really awful acts without any clear purpose, just inflicting harm for its own sake.
Wow.
It's a pretty chilling idea that this potential for purely predatory behavior, without obvious reasons, exists in all of us, even if, thankfully, very few actually act on it.
That idea
Yeah.
that it could be inside us,
Yeah.
that's quite challenging. So if that's true, how does society even work?
Yeah.
What stops most of us? How do we even measure this stuff?
Yeah, that's the crucial question. Society tries to manage it, basically, through three main things: social norms, moral codes, and just everyday manners, etiquette,
Okay.
like violence, for instance. Hitting someone is usually a crime, right? But we okay it for soldiers or police in certain situations. So the rules are complex, often contradictory.
Right.
And people who engage in this kind of dysfunctional behavior, they often feel exempt, like they're above the rules, above common morality. You saw this with fox hunting in England. Some wealthy folks kept doing it illegally, feeling they had a right, even though most people condemned it.
Interesting parallel.
It's a bit like white-collar crime sometimes, where the people causing huge public harm might see themselves as totally separate from, everyday moral concerns.
So society is trying to cage this wild beast within us.
Mm.
But here's a really provocative thought from the sources. What if all these norms, laws, morals, what if they aren't actually our natural state? What if a survivalist mentality is our real baseline? And society just trains us from day one to obey the rules set by the controlling group, often, the rich and powerful.
Well, if you look at human history, evolution, it suggested we all started as survivalists, hunter-gatherers. Societies got bigger, more complex, and they made rules, moral codes.
Right.
But maybe psychology needs to grapple with the idea that humans might be, well, naturally violent, cruel, dominating towards those they see as weaker. It raises a big question. Is pushing back against rules, against society itself, actually a natural human instinct, a kind of deep rebellion against rigid systems?
That's a really deep thought. Let's hold on to that as we shift to how these dark tactics actually show up in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
The sources list quite a range of people who might use them.
Yeah, it's quite a list. Narcissists, sociopaths, but also attorneys, politicians, salespeople, leaders, public speakers, even just generally selfish people.
So quite broad.
The absolute key distinction, though, that the sources hammer home is intent. When does influence become dark? Is the goal genuinely mutual, a win-win, or is it purely for the manipulator's gain? That's where you get the dangerous ends justifies the means thinking. A salesperson, for example, might truly think their product helps everyone, but they could still use dark tactics to close the deal, so the intent gets murky.
That makes distinguishing intent really tricky. Can influence ever be covert but benign? Or is covert itself the problem? Let's talk covert manipulation. What is that precisely?
Well, the moment you're covertly influencing someone, doing it secretly, you're basically bypassing their conscious agreement, right? Which often leans unethical by definition, even if the manipulator thinks they mean well.
Okay.
Covert manipulation means subtly persuading or directing someone without showing your hidden agenda, often targeting the subconscious. And our sources point out that sophisticated methods like NLP or PUA techniques, they're way more accessible now because of the internet, so more everyday folks are using them.
Can you give us some examples? How does that covert process actually work?
Sure. It can involve things like nonverbal cues to build rapport, maybe subtly mirroring body language.
Like copying gestures?
Exactly. Or guiding a conversation to only reveal certain facts, encoding hidden commands in speech, building false trust. The first step is usually building that connection, that rapport, a compliment, a shared joke, anything.
Right, breaking the ice.
Then the goal is often to kind of switch off the listener's critical thinking, using phrases like, what if, or imagine this. That shifts you from analyzing to imagining. It makes you much more open to suggestion.
Ah, okay. And you mentioned specific techniques. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, gets talked about a lot, often for self-help, but also for manipulation. You mentioned anchoring. How does that work?
Yeah, anchoring's a big one in NLP. Basically, you repeatedly pair a specific word or phrase or even a touch with a certain emotion or mental state. So a manipulator might consistently say, now, calmly consider this, every time you seem relaxed and receptive. Later on, just hearing calmly could subconsciously trigger that receptive feeling, making you more agreeable without you realizing why.
Wow, that's subtle.
And similarly, pickup artist or PUA techniques are another type of covert manipulation aimed at seduction. The ethical issue there, as the sources note, starts with its whole approach. It's not about equality. It comes from a place of dominance, superficial judgment, not human dignity. Using psychology for personal gain, often hurting someone else.
Right, that lack of egalitarianism is
Yeah.
key. So if this happens at the individual level, how does it scale up? How do these dark patterns get used to control whole populations?
Yeah.
Chomsky's work comes to mind here. His insights on media manipulation.
Absolutely. Chomsky argued that media isn't just a tool, it's a new type of power. It actively manages public perception, the public temperature, you could say,
Oh.
by deciding what issues get covered and, crucially, what gets ignored. This happens in all kinds of societies, authoritarian or supposedly democratic. His work really pulled together and exposed these practices, which can be pretty sophisticated.
Okay, let's unpack a couple of Chomsky's big manipulation strategies. First, the strategy of distraction, steering attention.
Exactly. It's about diverting public focus from the really important stuff, the big changes decided by elites, and instead just flooding people with constant distractions, trivial information.
Why? What's the goal?
Simple. Make the mind docile, less critical, less likely to engage with the real issues affecting their lives. You know the old Roman phrase, bread in circuses?
Yeah.
It's the same idea today. Think about how much media focuses on sensationalism, celebrity gossip, viral trends, whatever, while huge issues like civil rights, causes of war, economic problems just become background noise or normalized.
That's chillingly familiar. Okay, another strategy, the forced cycle of problem-reaction-solution. Sounds like creating crises on purpose.
It often is, or at least exploiting them. It's also called problem-reaction solution. You create a problem or hype one up to get a specific public reaction, usually fear or anger.
Right?
That reaction makes people demand action, makes them willing to accept measures they'd normally reject. For instance, maybe amplifying fears about urban violence to get people to accept tougher laws that restrict freedom.
Or like an economic crisis.
Exactly.
Right.
Create or worsen an economic crisis to justify cutting social programs, privatizing services. Naomi Klein wrote extensively about this in The Shock Doctrine, how elites use crises, use their information advantage to push through policies that benefit them, often presented as unavoidable necessities.
It feels like a key theme here is managing not just what people know, but how they feel. We also see promoting ignorance and replacing reflection with emotions, like keeping education for lower classes poor to maintain an ignorance gap.
That's a really critical point. Ignorance here isn't just not knowing, it's also not wanting to know. People might avoid complex topics because they feel ashamed of not understanding, or they just dismiss things with, nothing will change anyway.
Yeah, that's cynical resignation.
Right. And at the same time, instead of engaging people's rational, thoughtful side, manipulators try to stir up emotions, hit the unconscious, create a short circuit in rational thought. Emotional appeals focus on the feeling of a message, not the details, which effectively shuts down critical thinking and keeps people compliant.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. What does all this reveal about deception itself? We tend to think of it as just bad. But the sources suggest it's actually way more common, maybe even part of everyday life. Like the average person lies several times a day, even just little white lies.
It's true, which raises a really interesting point. Does deception sometimes serve a purpose? Dr. Bella DePaulo's research, for instance, shows people often lie for others' benefit to make social interactions smoother.
Like telling someone their cooking is great when maybe it isn't.
Exactly. Those little white lies often just grease the wheels. Apparently, women tend to lie more to make others feel good, while men lie more to boost their own image. It's not that we don't know we're doing it, but sometimes, psychologists argue, total honesty might actually be detrimental. A certain amount of deception might even be, well, necessary for society to function smoothly.
That's quite a different take on something we usually see as black and white. But then the sources throw this curveball, deception within psychology itself. The Diederik Stapel case in the Netherlands, this big-name psychologist, just fabricating data for years, dozens of papers.
Yeah, over 55 papers. He even plagiarized his own memoir. It was huge, and it pointed to a, quote, deep and widely spread issue in psychological research.
So what's the deal there?
It highlights this massive ethical bind in the field. Deception has often been seen by researchers as a kind of necessary evil to get at the truth. Think about Beth, the student mentioned in the sources. She signed up for a study thinking it was about online chat, but it was actually about racism. She was intentionally misled. And this is common practice. The justifications are usually, well, deception happens all the time anyway, subjects aren't really harmed, and we couldn't do this vital research without it.
That's deception.
The American Psychological Association actually permits deception. If the scientific value justifies it, there are no other options, and it doesn't cause physical pain or severe emotional distress. Essentially saying deception itself, if it's not severely harmful, isn't inherently off limits in research.
Wow. So given all this, these hidden influences everywhere, even in the places searching for truth, what does this mean for you, the listener? How do we possibly arm ourselves against all this?
Well, the absolute first, most critical defense, as our sources really stress, is just awareness.
Yeah.
Knowing these tactics exist, knowing they're pretty common, that's incredibly powerful.
It's not about being paranoid then.
No, not cynical or paranoid, just realistic. Many individuals, companies, governments, they have hidden agendas. Actively learning about these methods helps you spot them, whether they're aimed at you directly or coming through the media. Knowing about everything, even stuff we disagree with, is key for defense.
Okay, awareness is step one. But beyond just knowing, what are some concrete things we can do? Like to push back against those specific covert tactics you mentioned, the NLP mirroring, the what-if questions.
Great question. Okay, so if you think someone's mirroring you, subtly change your posture or your tone. If they immediately copy you, that's a pretty good sign they're mimicking, consciously or not.
Ah, test them.
Yeah. And for those what if, or imagine this questions, consciously bring the conversation back to facts or your own feelings instead of getting lost in their hypothetical scenario. That pulls your critical mind back from their imagination trap.
Okay, reclaiming control.
Also, assertive communication. It's vital against techniques like PUA, especially if you feel someone's twisting the conversation or getting too close. And fundamentally building strong personal boundaries. That's your shield against predators and manipulators.
So not just passively resisting, but actively disrupting their game. That feels practical. And what about all the persuasive messages we just swim in daily? How can we get better at spotting those?
Here's a practical exercise for you. Try this. Just spend half an hour watching some random TV, or even just pay close attention during your day. Consciously try to flag every time you see a persuasive or manipulative technique.
Like what specifically?
Look for attempts to create a need you didn't have, appeals to social belonging, using loaded emotional words. Look for foot in the door, getting you to agree to something small first to soften you up for a bigger ask.
Or the opposite.
Right. Door in the face, make a huge request they know you'll refuse, then ask for what they really wanted, making it seem reasonable by comparison. Notice reciprocity, giving a small gift to create obligation. Or using scarcity limited time offer. You'll probably be amazed how much you spot in just 30 minutes. Doing that regularly makes you way more discerning.
This deep dive really shows dark psychology isn't some niche topic. It's complex. It's everywhere, from one-on-one chats to huge societal forces. But I think what we've seen today is that knowledge really is power here.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. If society's rules often benefit the powerful, and maybe our basic human nature leans towards self-preservation, what real freedom do we actually have to shape our own lives? And what does it even mean to be well-informed when deception can creep into the very search for truth?
Something to definitely keep thinking about. We really encourage you to keep observing, keep questioning those influences you encounter every single day.